Major Israeli newspapers like Haaretz and Yedioth Ahronot published the front pages of their newspapers today with a black page mourning the death of democracy. But this is quite deceptive. The idea that Israelis, or at least liberal Zionists within Israeli society, is trying to convey is that the struggle in Israel and the so-called political crisis is a result of a fight over democracy and democratic institutions. I dare to disagree. Israel was never a true democracy. Also, this whole notion that, well, Israel is a democracy for Jews only doesn't work either. But it doesn't really work that way for democracy. It's either you are a democratic system for all of your citizens or you're not. There is no sectionalization in the way democracy works. So if it's not a fight over democratic institutions, what is it about? It is a class war. You see, throughout the years, there have been two different groups of Zionists, and they are indeed very different from a socio-economic and political power perspectives. On the one hand, you have the liberal Zionists. These are the ones who established Israel. Did you know that most of the founding fathers of Israel were actually not religious at all? In fact, majority of them were atheists. They basically used Judaism and they used the appeal to spirituality, the promised land. They used it as a way to drive millions of Jews into Palestine. And they have succeeded in doing so. They continue to manipulate religion and they continue to manipulate the religious segments of Israeli society. In 1967, when Israel found itself tripled in size after they invaded the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, the Jordan Valley, and parts of Lebanon, they needed more Jews to move to these areas that have just been conquered because they needed to ensure that these lands have been conquered in an irreversible way. So liberal Zionists did not want to move to the settlements. Who did? The religious Jews. So they manipulated them again and again and again. But they have used them historically to be the buffer between liberal Zionism and the Palestinians. So these settlers became emboldened, violent, they carried arms, and they are the ones who are carrying on with this progressive, incremental genocide, as Ilan Pappé likes to call it. But with time, those religious communities became stronger and stronger, and they moved from the margins of Israel's political paradigms to the very center. Now that Israel's religious Zionist groups are at the center of Israel's power, they are trying to change the rules of the system entirely. The system that was invented and perfected by liberal Zionists in order for them to serve their class interest. Liberal Zionists don't like it for two reasons. Number one, because they don't want to lose out in this class war that is going on in Israel right now. And number two, it means that once the religious groups are in power, they are in power for good. And that is exactly what's happening in Israeli society. So let's stop talking about democracy or not, because it's really deceiving a lot of people and giving the impression that Israel was a democratic society in the first place. Yes, Israel has elections and Israel has a voting system and they are transparent in that regard, but it excludes many segments of Israeli society. And even those Palestinians who are called the Arabs of 1948, when they vote in these elections, they are caught in a situation that their votes doesn't really matter much because nobody wants to enter into government coalitions with them because they are Arabs. So they find themselves, even though they are kind of validating Israel's claim to democracy, they are being completely marginalized from that system, or at least from the privileges offered by a democratic system. The millions of Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, they are not in any way involved in the democratic system of Israel, if that's what you want to call it. At the end of the day, it's not about democracy at all. It's like a Frankenstein making a monster. The monster was supposed to terrorize the villagers. Eventually, the Frankenstein monster turned around and is terrorizing Frankenstein himself. So, Frankenstein, you made your monster, now you live with it. This was Ramzi Baroud with One Take.